So Jesus had just taken Peter, James, and John up the mountain. And there they had a mountaintop experience. Because right in front of them, this peasant class carpenter rabbi was transformed, transfigured from his earthly Galilean look to his glorified appearance. They were able to see him for who he really was. And what an incredible faith-building experience it must have been. What an incredible mountaintop experience. You know, we say that we walk by faith and not by sight, but these guys saw it. These guys caught a glimpse of who Jesus truly is. They saw what victory looks like, and they witnessed the overcomer in all of his glory face to face. This must have been an incredible faith-strengthening experience. If they didn't believe before, dude, they totally must have believed now. Right? They totally must be all in now because they saw him face to face. Don't you need that? Don't you want to see him? Don't you need a kick in your faith's butt a little bit to kind of get you going? Don't you just want to see him face to face? Because I know we got people in the room. I know we got people in the room. And you're saying to yourself, I haven't seen that. I haven't witnessed that. When I look around, I don't see reasons to believe. All I see are every reason not to believe. Because my life isn't working out the way that I thought it would. You know, I grew up in church, and I was taught that every day is sweeter than the day before, right? But my life isn't working out according to the guarantee on the label. You know, I'm not finding that every day is sweeter than the day before. My marriage is faltering. My kids won't call me back. The system has marked me and I can't get out. I keep praying for healing, but healing doesn't come. And I look around and the ones around me that are, you know, the most Christian-y, they're the ones that seem to be suffering the most. They're the ones that seem to be the poorest the most. So yeah, I used to believe, I used to be a lit up on fire follower of Jesus, but now I'm not so sure. I used to be sold out to him completely, but now my light doesn't shine so bright. I mean, here I am in church, but I'm not really here for Jesus. I'm here for my wife. I'm not really here to worship. I'm here because it's expected of me. Does that make me a hypocrite? Does that somehow make me a lower grade Christian? Does that mean I'm not even a Christian anymore? First blank on your page is this: what if I just doubt? I don't really want to doubt, but what if I just doubt? What if I just look around and what if I'm just not convinced? So I think that this next part of the story ought to help us, because I think what we find in this next part of the story is exactly where we are. Jesus, along with Peter, James, and John, they come back down the mountain. And look, by the way, you always come back down the mountain. We all love the mountaintop experience. You remember the mountaintop experience? I'm asking you a question. Do you remember the mountaintop experience? Maybe it was youth camp. Maybe it was VBS. Maybe it was a mission trip that you were on. Maybe it was an incredible revival service. Maybe it was something as a kid. Maybe it was something as an adult. But you remember the mountaintop experience where you feel like you were in the presence of God himself and you could see him face to face. You could just reach out and touch him. He's right there, and you have the mountaintop experience. But the mountaintop experience cannot last. Not designed to last. Your life is not designed to be always mountaintop. Even Jesus brings his disciples back down from the mountain. So coming down the mountain isn't a sin. Coming down the mountain is always just the next step in the process. So it's okay. It's okay if your life is not always a mountaintop experience. Because, dude, we go to the mountaintop, but we also go through the valley, don't we? So Jesus and his guys, they come back down the mountain, and when they arrive back down the mountain where everyone else is, they arrive in the middle of an ongoing public fight. Yeah, there's a fight going on. There's a ruckus. Everybody is all stirred up because something has just happened, and Jesus walks right up on it. Here's where we find Jesus in the story in Mark 9. When they came to the disciples, when Jesus, Peter, James, and John come back down and they arrive where the disciples are, they saw a great crowd around them, surrounding them, and scribes arguing with them. And immediately, all the crowd, when they saw Jesus, were greatly amazed, and they ran up to Jesus and they greeted him. So, first of all, there's a ruckus, there's a dust up going on, an argument with the disciples and the scribes. Who would have known, right? Who would have known that these people would be arguing? So they're arguing, not sure what's going on yet. And then all of a sudden, people come running to Jesus, amazed at him. This word amazed is Greek word ekthambeo. It can be a positive or it can be a negative word, ekthambeo. It can mean amazed. It can also be alarmed. It can be distressed. So they were overcome, let's say, with emotion when they saw Jesus. They were alarmed or distressed or amazed. I wonder why. He's just walking up. Why are they amazed? Is it possible maybe he's come down the mountain, but he's still got some of that glow of the transfiguration on him, and maybe everyone's drawn to him? Maybe they're distressed. Maybe they're alarmed because they're all arguing, and here comes the master. Here comes the rabbi. Uh-oh, he's caught us arguing, and maybe they're running over to say, it's okay. Hey, we're here for you, Jesus. Don't worry about what's going on with the argument. Or maybe they're amazed because they're a little starstruck, right? I mean, Jesus is the local celebrity, and he's the one that's been going around doing all the teaching and the healing, and maybe they're just starstruck. Maybe the star has arrived, and they're just excited to see him. I don't know, but they come running to Jesus. And Jesus asks him in verse 16, he asks him, what are you arguing about with them? Why are you guys arguing now? I've just been up on the mountain. Can you give me 10 minutes? I'm just up on the mountain, and I come down, and now everything has fallen apart. Why are you arguing? And someone from the crowd answered, Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they suck. I just want you to know, Jesus, I brought my boy who is the victim of this demon oppression, and your disciples, they just couldn't do nothing about it. I mean, it's like it was their first day at work, and they hadn't been trained on the demon casting out yet. So what's up with that, Jesus? So, okay, now we see, this is what the argument is about. It's the scribes and the disciples. And nowhere in the Gospels does it tell us how the argument went, but it's pretty clear that this boy had been brought by the dad to the disciples, and he said, hey, Jesus ain't here. He's up on the mountain. You're going to have to give him a minute. He's not here. Well, my boy's suffering. Can you guys, I mean, you're his disciples. You are his disciples. You follow the rabbi. So surely you're in on the power that he has. Maybe you can just do something about my boy. He's been suffering for a long time. This demon's got him right where he wants him. It hurts my heart to see what he goes through with this demonic influence. Can you please just do something with him? And as far as we can tell, the disciples tried and failed. they were unable to cast the demon out of the boy. Now, I think this is what the argument was about, because the scribes were always watching from just outside of arm's reach, watching Jesus and watching the disciples, and they were looking for any chance they could get to prove that Jesus couldn't possibly be the Messiah from God, that he could not possibly have authority from God, that he could not possibly speak for God, because he wasn't one of them. He wasn't part of the religious in crowd. So he couldn't possibly be who he claims to be, or at least who everybody else is claiming to be. And so once they saw this dad bring the boy to the disciples and they failed, oh, it was on. Those scribes were ready. Aha! See, everybody, come here. Everybody look. They suck, man. They couldn't do anything. There's no power in these people. They claim to be disciples of the rabbi, and the rabbi is supposed to be this great rabbi, this great Messiah figure. And look at him, can't even cast this demon out of this boy. See, nothing to be seen here. You need to stop listening to them, and you need to keep listening to us. Well, I've looked in this story, and as far as I can tell, we see later in the story that the disciples had tried but failed. But as far as I can tell, the scribes never even tried. Here they are accusing the disciples, and the scribes themselves, as far as I can see, never bothered to even try to help this poor boy. All they're there to do is accuse. What the heck have you guys done? Nothing. We're just here to point our finger. We're just here to judge and condemn the disciples of Jesus. And listen, I'm here to tell you, that's what the enemy is all about. He is all about pointing his finger and finding every fault you got in your life and saying, see, that just proves that God isn't really worthy of being God. Because look how he let you down. Look how you let him down. You can't possibly be. Why are you even in church? If these people knew what you said, if these people knew what you did, if these people even knew what you were thinking right now, they'd kick you out of here. They'd reject you in a second. How dare you claim to work for him when you just work for yourself? And the enemy is out to accuse the believers and to prove that somehow they aren't worthy. And he wants to, his whole goal, his whole purpose, in fact, this is the next blank on your page, is to engender doubt in you. His whole goal is to be an accuser so that he engenders doubt, so he causes you to doubt your faith. He wants you in a position where you look around and say, well, I hadn't seen God at work. You know, you're right. I let him down all the time because where he hadn't shown up and helped me. I came to him with an incredible need, just like this dad did, and where was Jesus when I needed him? He's off on some mountaintop having a great experience, and I'm down here suffering. He wants to engender doubt in you. So that's what the argument is about, and that's what's going on here, is the scribes are accusing the disciples. And so in verse 19, Jesus says to them, look at what Jesus says. You want him to say, verily, verily, let there be peace. No. We have such a cartoon character in our minds about who Jesus is. Look at what Jesus says. He looks at everybody. I don't think this is directed at the disciples or the scribes or the crowd. I think he's talking to everybody that can hear him. And he says, oh, faithless generation. How long have I got to put up with you? How long have I got to deal with you? I mean, let me say it in his words. How long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Is it okay that Jesus gets a little frustrated with us from time to time? Does Jesus deserve to be frustrated with us from time to time? I mean, not the cartoon character Jesus. The cartoon character Jesus, he just loves us no matter what. He just wants to crawl up in our lap and stroke our hair and whisper into our ear, and he'll take us however he can get us. You know, the cartoon character of Jesus, he's a weak little sissy. That's not the real Jesus. The real Jesus has been dealing with the disciples in ministry now for maybe just right over a year and a half. He's been doing his ministry for right over a year and a half. And he's been living with us when he could be on his throne in heaven, when he could be living with his Father in glory. But he has spent now at this time a little over 30 years among us. And he's been talking to us about the kingdom, and he's been pointing up. He's always been talking about the kingdom, and here we are going, nah, I just want to fight about stuff. I don't want the kingdom, I want my kingdom. I don't want what you have, I want what I can build. I don't know that you're really worthy. I kind of doubt in you altogether. I want what I want. Now. And Jesus gets frustrated with us. How long am I to be with you, faithless generation? And then Jesus tells them what they should have done in the first place. He says, bring him to me. Bring the boy to me. You know, a lot of us have doubt because we've seen other believers, right? We've been in church long enough. Maybe you've been in church long enough. Maybe you're at this church because you got burned at your last church. Something happened there. Somebody said something. Somebody did something. Somebody was too controlling. Somebody was too authoritative. Somebody was too belligerent. Someone was too insensitive. Somebody was ungrateful. Whatever happened, something happened. And you lost it, and you walked away. Maybe you didn't get mad. Maybe you didn't overreact. Maybe you just walked away, and you were away for a while. You wandered for a while, and you were not part of the body of Christ. And then sooner or later, at some point, you showed up here. You might have shown up in other places, but you showed up here for whatever reason. And part of the reason you're here is because you're hiding out from there. You're laying low from there. You don't want them to know where you are. You don't even want to think about them because that brings back hurt, it brings back pain, and it engenders doubt. And so you're doing your best, but now you're here. There, you were serving, you were in a group, you were working for the kingdom. Here, you're sitting back. There, you were leaning in. Here, you're laying back. There, you were all about it. Here, you're just kind of keeping your toe in the water to see how warm it is. Not sure. There's doubt. And you walked away because of something that Jesus' followers did. But don't you remember we saw earlier, his followers kind of suck sometimes. I mean, we are human beings. And I'm here to promise you, at some point, we will let you down. We're going to let you down. Everything in this world is going to let you down at some point. Am I right? So why did you walk away from what God has for you because of what somebody else did? You shouldn't be bringing it to Jesus' staff. You should be bringing it to Jesus. You come to him. You give your life to him. Hello? Hello? So Jesus says, bring him to me. Bring him to me. Stop focusing in on what my people can and can't do. My people aren't always going to be there for you. I wish they would, but they're still faithless. Yep, they're still faithless to some degree. Bring him to me. Your hurts, your doubts, your suffering, bring it to Jesus. And so, verse 20, they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. Now, I just want to time out right here for a second. Now, look, I know some people look at this passage and they say, well, here's a perfect reason why I don't believe in the Bible, because here it's describing what we know today to not be demon activity, but to be epilepsy. And this poor kid is suffering from a grand mal seizure. So it's pretty obvious that these are ignorant people. And so they don't believe in the Bible. I understand that. And when you read this, it really, to me, it does look like this kid may have been an epileptic that they did not know how to treat. But here's what I believe. I believe both can be true. I believe that it can have been epilepsy, but it can also have been demonic activity. First of all, because Jesus acknowledged it. And what we see is that Jesus deals with the demon in this boy. So if Jesus believed it, I'm going to believe it. Second thing is, I don't think it's a coincidence if the kid's got epilepsy. I don't think it could possibly be the coincidence that they bring him in front of Jesus and then right on cue, he goes into a seizure. I think both can be true, because here's what I think. I think Satan's out to get you, and he's always going to be targeting your weakest thing. He's always going to be coming at you where you are. He's not going to come at you where you're the strongest. Of course he's not going to come at you where everything is good, safe, and you feel like you are secure. He's going to come at you at the parts you're not watching. He's going to come at you at the part that already hurts the most. He's going to come at you about that past experience. He's going to come at you in that weak relationship. He's going to come at you wherever you are the weakest, and he's going to leverage that to create and engender doubt in you. Am I right? And so I think that may be what Satan is doing with this dad, is he's leveraging this boy's weakness to hurt this kid and to engender doubt in this dad. So we see this happening here, kids foaming at the mouth, and Jesus asks his father, how long has this been happening to him? And the father says, well, from childhood. And look at this, it's often cast him into the fire and into water to destroy him. In other words, it doesn't just happen, but it happens in a way that causes self-harm. Another indication that it's more than just a physical thing. It throws him in the fire, it throws him into water, it's trying to destroy him. Do we see demonic activity today among our young generation? Do we see an inclination to self-harm with this generation? Oh, we see it in dozens of different ways. I remember as a youth pastor, when I first began in youth ministry, good grief, back in the late 80s. Hold on a minute. I had never heard of kids cutting themselves. It really wasn't a thing back then. But by the end of the 90s, dude, it had become a fairly prevalent disease among our young people. And I don't feel like it's simply a mental condition. I feel like it's a demonic condition. I think we still see demonic activity today. And you can blame emotional problems. You can blame mental problems. I agree with that, but both can be true. And I believe that Satan comes at our young people and causes them self-harm. He wants to destroy our young generation. Are we here for them? Hello? Are we here for them? Do we care about them and love them and want to do whatever we can for them? Of course we do. And Jesus does too. He's saying, what's going on here? How long has this been going on? And the dad describes it, self-harm. And then he says this. This is really interesting. This gives us a lot of insight on the dad. He says to Jesus, but if you can do anything, if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. So he's looking at Jesus. And he hasn't seen the mountaintop Jesus. He hasn't seen the transfigured Jesus. He's looking at the Galilean peasant rabbi And he says, if you can do anything, what do you got? You got anything for me? Because your disciples sure didn't. And I'm not sure that you can. If you can, please help. And Jesus in verse 23 says to him, if you can. If you can. I almost see Jesus here saying, hold my beer. If you can, come on. If you can. And then he makes this statement that we love. He says, all things are possible for one who believes, if I can. Come on, if I can. All things are possible. Now, we love to proclaim this passage. All things are possible. Don't we say it all the time? With God, all things are possible. All things are possible for him who believes. We love this. Is it true? Absolutely, it's true. We love to hang on to this. But it's hard to hang on to it when you're a person of doubt. Right? Because you're looking around in your life and you're saying, I got a lot of impossibility in my life. I got things I've been praying for years. I got things I've been on my knees, on my face, crying and begging and pleading with God. And where is he? He's off on some mountaintop. Where is he? Not so sure anymore. I'm just here to make my wife happy. I'm just here because I know I should be in church. But I'm not even sure where, I don't see him in my life. I'm not seeing him. So yeah, sure, all things are possible, but I sure don't know if I believe. Still lots of impossible in my life. And in my mind, I'm hearing Jesus right now, if you can. Listen to me. Jesus has done the greatest miracle ever, the biggest miracle I've ever heard of Jesus doing. He did it in you. He did it in you. He took you, a sinful wretch who was a traitorous criminal against a holy God who deserved swift, severe punishment, and instead of choosing to punish you, he chose to love you. Instead of dealing with you like you deal with a criminal, he chose to embrace you because of Jesus. He chose to let his son die on your behalf and pay the price for your sin. He rose again, and now he comes to you. He doesn't even just accept you. He moves into your life and begins to rearrange everything so that you look more and more like him. Instead of punishing you, he's transforming you. He's making you new. He's loving you. He's walking with you, and he is in your life and active every single day. Are you kidding me? If you can, look at what he's already done in you. Look at what he continues to do in you. Jesus says anything is possible, and if he can save a wretch like me, then what more proof do you need? What more proof do you need? Dude, I don't need to see Jesus transfigured and holy in appearance. I can just look back in my life, and I've seen what he's done, and I'm overwhelmed by it. I'm totally convinced by it. He makes all the difference in my life. But that had not happened in this man's life, in this dad's life. He hadn't seen it. All he's got is a foaming at the mouth boy rolling around. He's rolling around on the ground right now. He's suffering right now. He's in pain right now. He's at the feet of the dad and of Jesus. He's right here between us. Please do something, Jesus. Jesus says all things are possible. Well, here he is. And then he says this amazing prayer. He says this thing to Jesus that ought to be the prayer of each of our lives, all of us. It says this in verse 24, immediately the father cried out and said, I believe. Help my unbelief. All things are possible for him who believes. I believe, but I don't quite believe. I know I don't quite believe. I know I'm not quite there yet. Help my unbelief. I'm there, I'm not quite there, but I want to be there. Help my unbelief. The thing I want you to see, this is really, really important. Boy, if you don't write anything else down, I really hope you write this down. There's a blank for it on your notes. It's the next blank. There is a huge difference between being an unbeliever and having unbelief. Okay, a huge difference between the two. There's one thing to be an atheist and say God's not real, Jesus not real, it's all a fairy tale, an unbeliever, never not walking with God, nothing. dead to Christ. But a person who has unbelief can be a person of faith. You, a disciple of Christ, you can have some level of unbelief. And I'm just going to be honest with you, and I'm going to ask you to be honest with yourself. Have you had times where you walk through seasons of unbelief? Because I do. I'm the pastor, and I do. Yet, I have heard it taught that you, as a Christian, must believe and never, 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 ever, ever, never, never doubt. Don't doubt anything but doubt. Because as a believer, if you have any little doubt at all, well, then you're not really a believer. And God's not going to do anything in your life. You believe in Him, or else, if you have any doubt, at all, you're going to spend your life sick and impoverished. And your whole family will also. And these people that teach this, I mean, have you heard that? Have you heard that taught before? Anybody? Here? Yes? Yeah, I've heard it. I've heard that taught before. And the people that teach this, I disagree with them, but they have some basis to go on. They have some basis, some scriptural basis to go on. James, the brother of Jesus, wrote a letter. It's a very famous letter, and it's in the Bible. And he gives us a lot of great instruction. I love the book of James. And in James, in his letter, he writes this. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, because God gives generously to all without reproach. And if you ask him, it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts, look at this, the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person, the doubter, must not suppose he will receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man and unstable in all of his ways. So the scripture is clear. When we ask him, we must not doubt. Because if we doubt, and the word for doubt here is the Greek word diakrino. Diakrino can mean multiple things. It's got multiple meanings, but they all are in the doubt vein. It can mean to hesitate. It can mean to contend or to fight or to be stressed out about something. Or it can mean to waver, as is described here in this passage. Hesitate, contend, waver. It all means doubt. James is saying, believe, don't hesitate, don't stress about it, don't waver back and forth. The doubter, the waverer, the stress, anxiety-filled person, the one who hesitates, that person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. And I say, well, of course not. Of course that's correct. Why would you ever expect God to honor doubt? Why would you expect God to honor the waverer? Why would you expect God to honor the person who says, God, please help me, but then goes back to his, filthy garbage, like a dog returning to his vomit? Why would you ever expect God to honor the waverer? That doesn't make any sense at all. But listen, here's what I'm here to say. The doubter should never expect to receive anything from God. But when you are faithless, it's God that is always faithful. God will never honor our doubt, but God gives grace despite our doubt. You see, grace is something that you and I should never expect. It's a gift that is given. It's not something that you've earned. If you believe and never doubt, well, then you've earned God's favor. But you can't earn God's favor. He gives it by grace. And Ephesians 2 says it's by grace that you're saved through faith. And that faith is not even your own faith. It's a gift from God. Faith is a gift from God. So you and I may doubt, you and I may be faithless, but He is always faithful. In other words, here's what I want to say, next blank on your page: doubt doesn't disqualify your faith. You hear me? Doubt doesn't disqualify your faith. I'm not saying it's okay to doubt. I'm not saying it's good to doubt. I'm not saying you should listen to Satan, the accuser, and cultivate doubt. But what I'm saying is that Jesus can always overcome your doubt. Jesus always gives grace that way outruns your doubt. Hello? I'm going to say that I can back my position up on this biblically because I look back at the heroes of faith, and I look through Hebrews 11, the faith chapter, where the heroes of faith are listed, and most of those had doubt. Who's the father of our faith? Abraham. Abraham doubted, and he lied about his wife, and he pimped her out because he didn't trust that God would protect him. He doubted, yet God used him. Moses, who stood there on top of the mountain with Jesus in glory, when God appeared to Moses and said, I'm calling you, Moses, you will go and you will speak for me. Moses like, yeah, I think you got the wrong guy. I stutter. I don't speak too good, Lee. It's not me. I can't do this. And he tried to get out of it because he doubted, and yet God used him, and he became Moses. Hello? Esther, one of my favorite stories of how God's providential power works behind the scenes. Her people are destined to be killed. There's a holiday coming up where all the Jews are going to be killed. And Mordecai sends a word to Esther and says, you better go talk to the king. You're in a unique position to go speak for your people on our behalf. Go tell him to call this off. And you know what she did? She doubted. She said, I don't think I can do that. If I go before the king, he'll kill me. God won't protect me. She doubted, and yet God used her, and he worked through Esther. David doubted after he sinned. And he thought God had abandoned him and forgotten about him. Yet now we have this whole book of Psalms, most of which David's put together. Elijah, the other guy that stood with Jesus there on top of the mountain, the prophet who had seen incredible God victories in his life, ran in fear and hid on a mountain because he was afraid of Jezebel. He doubted God would protect him from this woman. And God showed up and said, get back to work, Elijah. And then God used him exactly the way he said. If you doubt, you are in good company. All of us go through seasons of doubt, but God never goes through a season of faithlessness. He is always faithful and gives grace despite our doubt. That's exactly what happens in this story. This guy prays the prayer, I believe, but help my unbelief. And then in verse 25, when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, everybody wanted to come see what would happen. So Jesus, it says, rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, the demon came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, he's dead. He's dead, Jim. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. Jesus did the miracle despite the man's doubt. I'm just asking you, what do you think happened to this dad's faith at that point? It went from a 1 to a 10. Shouldn't it? I mean, it had to. Bible doesn't tell us anything more about this guy, but I'm sure that this dad spent the rest of his life telling everybody about what Jesus did for his son. He went from, if you can do anything, to I saw him do the amazing. He had doubted, but Jesus gave grace and changed everything. And this guy went home that day with his life completely changed, with a healthy, demon-free son, and no doubt that Jesus is who he says he is. Look, see, all things are possible for him who believes. Somewhere deep down, this guy who had some unbelief still believed. And I think that's true about you too. I think that you may feel like you've walked away because you've been burned, you've been hurt. You're like, well, they said nasty things to me. You know, they let me down. I found out what big hypocrites they are, and I walked away. I'm just not part of this anymore. I just want to ask you, have you ever had a bad meal before? Do you still eat? I'm just saying that don't lay on Jesus' followers the blame for your disappointment. They're going to let you down. They're going to fall short. We all fall short of the glory of God. That's our problem, and that's why we all need the same solution. None of us is perfect, but Jesus is. And he's the one that gives us grace. Can you imagine? I know it's hard for you to show grace to those that have burned you in the past. So just think about how hard it must be for Jesus to show you grace. Even though you've rebelled against him, even though you gave your life to him, even though you said, I'm yours, I'm following you, you sang the song, I surrender all. And then what did you do? You took it all back. Then what did you do? You gave him the finger, and you said, I'm going to do what I want to do. And you've done it time and time and time again, and yet he loves you, and he gives you grace. Because he gives grace despite our doubt. He always does. So I guess what I'm saying is the last blank on your page is bring it all to Jesus. Bring it all to Jesus. Jesus says the solution, bring him to me. Bring him to me. Stop looking at everybody else. Here's what they can and can't do. They all kind of suck. I know. Bring him to me. Bring it to me. Come to me, all you who are weak and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Let's pray together.